On January 29, 1986, an unidentified object impacted the slopes of Height 611 near Dalnegorsk in the Soviet Far East. The official investigation concluded it was a natural bolide. This conclusion has two problems. First, the object maneuvered. Multiple independent witnesses observed it alter course twice during its approach, neither change consistent with ballistic trajectory under any atmospheric model the investigators applied. Second, meteors do not leave behind metallic mesh. The debris recovered from the impact site included a structured lattice of metal filaments, 3 to 30 microns in diameter, with a crystalline organization that Soviet metallurgists, the ones cleared to examine it, could not reproduce in laboratory conditions and could not attribute to any known natural or industrial process. Natural impactors do not produce crystalline metal lattices. The object that struck Height 611 left something behind. The something has been growing ever since. I found this program through a geological monitoring registry I was systematizing for an institutional inventory of Soviet earth science programs in the Primorsky Krai. Height 611 appeared as a cross-reference anomaly in the geological registry of the Dalnegorsk district beginning in 1987, 1 year after the incident. There are records of progressive crystalline structure anomalies in bedrock samples from the surrounding area, not radiological anomalies. Crystalline anomalies. Anomalies in the physical organization of the rock itself, progressing outward from the impact site over time, source unidentified. The anomalies do not diminish with time. The most recent registry entry before my access is from 2020. The anomalies are larger in 2020 than they were in 1987. In those days, the Soviet state monitored everything. Every geological survey, every anomaly, every unexplained event was documented and filed away. Today, your data is just as vulnerable. NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic and keeps your identity hidden from anyone trying to track what you do online. Check the link in the pinned comment for an exclusive deal. Nothing personal. Crystalline structure anomalies in bedrock that began 1 year after an unidentified impact event and have been growing for 34 years. Growing geological anomalies with no identified source are what archivists investigate. The initial analysis of the impact site debris was conducted by Dr. Nikolai Belov, 44 years old, a metallurgist from the Institute of Metal Physics in Sverdlovsk, who was brought in under KGB authority within 3 weeks of the incident. He had spent his career analyzing the crystalline microstructure of metals under extreme conditions: high pressure, high temperature, rapid solidification, and had extensive experience with the full range of terrestrial and experimental metallurgical products. He had not previously encountered what he found at Height 611. His research journal from February 1986.
February 12th. Initial microscopy complete. Sample 6, 11A1, exhibits filamentary structure. Diameter range 3 to 30 microns. Composition: iron, chromium, nickel, manganese, tungsten. Trace elements include silicon and aluminum. The filaments are not wires. They are not drawn or extruded. Under electron microscopy, the crystalline structure is continuous along the length of each filament. With no evidence of mechanical processing, the lattice organization is not random. The filaments intersect at regular angles, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, forming a three-dimensional mesh. This is not a natural formation. This is not an industrial product. February 18th. Attempted replication under laboratory conditions. Rapid solidification from melt. Controlled atmosphere. Temperature gradient matching estimated impact conditions. Result: filamentary structures formed, but crystalline organization is chaotic. No regular lattice. No 60-degree intersections. The sample from height 611 exhibits order. I cannot reproduce the order. February 24th. X-ray diffraction analysis complete. The crystalline structure is not consistent with any known alloy phase diagram. The lattice parameters do not match any terrestrial metal or intermetallic compound in the reference database. I have consulted with colleagues in Moscow and Leningrad. No one has seen this before. No one can explain it. March 3rd. KGB liaison informed me today that my analysis is complete. I am to submit my final report and return all samples to state custody. I am not to discuss my findings with anyone outside the authorized personnel list. I do not believe my analysis is complete. I believe it has only just begun.
Belov wrote in his journal,
I want to document my analysis of the metallic mesh material before the official classification is applied, because I have the sense that once classified, the specific character of what I have found will be subordinated to whatever institutional category the classifiers choose, and the character is more important than the category. The material is a mesh, a three-dimensional lattice of metal filaments ranging from 3 to 30 microns in diameter, organized in a geometry that has no analog in any metallurgical product I have examined. The filaments are not random. They are arranged in a hierarchical branching pattern at 4 distinct scales: primary filaments, secondary filaments branching from them, tertiary filaments, and a fourth order of filaments connecting tertiary filaments across branches. The geometry at each scale is consistent. The branching angles are the same. The proportions are the same. The crystalline orientation of the filaments is aligned across the hierarchy. This is not a random assembly. It is an organized structure with a logic that repeats at multiple scales. In biological science, structures with this property, organized hierarchy, repeating across scales, are called fractal. In metallurgy, they do not occur naturally. They occur in designed components, but no designed component I have encountered uses this geometry. The filaments themselves, the crystalline structure of the metal, is organized in a way that I cannot reproduce. I have attempted to replicate the crystalline orientation using every solidification technique I have access to. I cannot do it. The material was not produced by any solidification process known to me. It was produced by something else. I want to note one additional observation that I am uncertain how to classify. The material is not inert. Over the 14 days I have had it, the mass has increased by approximately 0.3%. I have controlled for contamination. The mass increase is real. The material is incorporating something from its environment and adding to itself.
The material is incorporating something from its environment and adding to itself. A metallurgist who had built his career on knowing what metals do, watching a material do something metals do not do, writing it in his journal before the classification arrived and the institutional category was applied. The second round of laboratory analysis, conducted in late 1986 and early 1987, expanded on Belov's initial finding. The geochemist assigned to characterize the replacement process was Dr. Elena Turova, 50 years old, from the Institute of Geochemistry and Analytical Chemistry in Moscow. Her analysis report, filed in March 1987, describes what the material does to rock over time. The geochemist's final report contained a section that would change everything. She wrote,
I want to characterize the replacement process with precision, because precision is what makes the finding significant, and imprecision makes it sound like something it is not. The metallic mesh material does not merely rest on or in rock. It converts rock. The process I have documented across 12 samples taken from the height 611 impact zone at varying distances and depths is as follows. The mesh material makes contact with rock, basalt in this case, but we have tested the process with granite and limestone and found consistent results. The mesh filaments extend into the rock matrix at the crystalline grain boundaries, the weakest structural planes. As extension proceeds, the silicon and oxygen components of the silicate minerals are progressively replaced by the metallic material. The replacement is not dissolution. The rock does not become rubble. The crystalline structure is maintained, but the composition changes. The product of the replacement is a material that retains the mechanical properties of the original rock, similar hardness, similar density, but has completely different optical and electromagnetic properties. The replacement product absorbs electromagnetic radiation across the spectrum from near ultraviolet through microwave. It does not reflect, it does not transmit, it absorbs. A layer of replacement material 1 centimeter thick absorbs greater than 99.7% of incident electromagnetic radiation. The replacement product is, in electromagnetic terms, as close to a perfect absorber as any material I have tested. I cannot identify a mechanism for this absorption that derives from the material's chemical composition. The absorption is a property of the crystalline structure, and the crystalline structure is a property of the replacement process, and the replacement process is a property of the mesh, and the mesh arrived at height 611 on January 29, 1986.
Greater than 99.7% absorption of electromagnetic radiation. A geochemist documenting a material that was replacing rock with something that light, all light across the full spectrum, could not pass through, could not reflect off of, could not interact with in any way except be absorbed. A material that, if it spread through enough rock, would produce a region of the Earth's interior that electromagnetic signals of any frequency could not penetrate. The director of the KGB program monitoring the Height 611 impact called Moscow in November 1986, 10 months after the incident.
Director, I am calling to report a finding from the second geological sampling of the Height 611 impact zone that changes the program's threat assessment. Moscow, proceed. Director, the mesh material is not confined to the surface layer of the impact site. We have taken core samples at 6 points around the impact zone, at depths ranging from 20 to 50 meters. At all 6 points, at all depths sampled, the metallic replacement material is present in the rock matrix. At 40 meters depth, at the core point furthest from the visible surface impact zone, the replacement material constitutes approximately 8% of the sampled volume. Moscow, that depth was not affected in the first sampling. Director, correct. 3 months after the impact, our first core samples from this depth showed standard basalt. No metallic material. The replacement material is at 40 meters now. It was not there 3 months ago. Moscow. Rate of vertical propagation. Director. Based on the 2 sampling periods, 3 months post-impact and 10 months post-impact, the vertical propagation rate is approximately 5 meters per month downward from the surface. The horizontal propagation front is unknown. Our sampling grid is insufficient to establish the boundary. Moscow. Establish the boundary.
5 meters per month, downward into the Earth. The mesh was spreading, and no one knew how to stop it. What happened next would force Moscow to make a decision that violated every protocol in the Soviet scientific establishment.
That requires expanding the sampling grid significantly. We would need to drill at distances of 10 to 50 kilometers from the impact point to establish where the horizontal front currently is. Do not expand the sampling grid. Close the zone. Classify all existing samples at maximum level. We do not want an expanded grid establishing the horizontal extent on paper. Understood. I want to note for this record that not establishing the extent on paper does not change the extent. The material is propagating whether we measure it or not. Noted. Close the zone.
Note it. Close the zone. Moscow's instruction was to stop measuring rather than to stop the propagation. To close the administrative record at the point where the data was still manageable rather than to follow the data to where it would go. The zone was closed. The official reason was radiation hazard, a standard Soviet designation for impact sites of unknown origin that generated no external inquiry. The internal memorandum filed the same day noted, "No radiation hazard present. Hazard is of a different character." The zone was closed because measuring further would produce numbers that were difficult to manage institutionally. Here's the first contradiction. The official 1986 investigation of the Dalnegorsk incident concluded that the object was a natural bolide, a meteor or meteorite, based on the trajectory witnesses described and the materials recovered. The conclusion characterized the metallic mesh as debris from a natural iron-nickel meteoritic body, fragmented and altered by the impact. The conclusion is in the public record and has been the official Soviet and Russian position on the incident for 38 years. The metallurgical analysis conducted under KGB authority by Belov and subsequently by 3 additional specialists characterizes the mesh as not reproducible by any known natural or industrial process, organized in a hierarchical fractal geometry, absent from any natural or artificial material in the reference literature, demonstrating mass increase consistent with self-replication using environmental materials, and producing replacement material with electromagnetic absorption properties that exceed those of any known engineered absorber. The official characterization and the classified metallurgical analysis describe the same physical samples collected from the same impact site. One describes natural debris. The other describes something that cannot have occurred naturally and cannot have been produced by any known industrial process. Here is the second contradiction. The geological registry of the Dalnegorsk district contains standard rock sample analyses from the region around height 611. The first post-incident samples, taken in spring 1986 at multiple depths, show standard basalt consistent with the region's geological profile. The same sampling locations, sampled again in late 1986 and in 1987, show progressive replacement of the basalt matrix with the metallic material documented by Turova. two geological analyses of the same rock at the same locations, separated by months. One shows unaltered basalt, the other shows rock that is 8 to 18% replaced by a material that was not there before. The rock changed. The only change that occurred between the two sampling periods was the arrival of the mesh material at those depths, propagating downward from the surface impact point at 5 meters per month. Here is the third contradiction, the document that should not exist. The Geological Registry's monitoring record for the height 611 zone continues through 2020, 34 years of data that someone has continued to collect and file, despite the zone's official closure. The 2020 entry characterizes the anomaly zone at the surface as 847 square kilometers. 847 square kilometers of surface area showing crystalline structure anomalies. The map in the 2020 entry marks this zone with a notation: surface data only, depth extent not mapped. I searched for any attempt to map the depth extent. I found a 2015 seismic survey, not connected to the Height 611 program, a standard geological resource survey conducted by a university research group that covered the Dalnegorsk region as part of a broader Far Eastern geological assessment. In the survey's data, there is an anomalous acoustic layer at depths between 200 and 800 meters, extending horizontally beneath the height 611 zone and beyond it in all directions. The layer is characterized in the survey's technical notation as atypical for the region, high acoustic density, horizontal extent exceeding 1,400 kilometers. 1,400 kilometers. Not the 847 square kilometer surface zone that the program's 2020 monitoring entry documents. A horizontal acoustic layer at depth extending 1,400 kilometers from the impact point in some direction, and possibly more in directions the survey did not cover. The seismic survey team characterized the layer as anomalous and filed it as an unexplained regional geological feature. They had no context for the Height 611 program. They were measuring rock properties, and the rock at depth across a region spanning 1,400 kilometers had properties inconsistent with the regional geological profile. High acoustic density, consistent with the electromagnetic absorption properties Turova documented in her 1987 analysis of the replacement material. 5 meters per month of vertical propagation since 1986. 38 years at 5 meters per month produces 2,280 meters of vertical propagation. The seismic layer is at 200 to 800 meters depth. The propagation rate may have changed. The horizontal spread, 5 meters per month for 38 years, projected uniformly, would produce a radius of approximately 2,280 meters. The seismic layer extends 1,400 kilometers. The propagation is not uniform. It is faster horizontally than the initial vertical rate suggested. The mesh is below Vladivostok. The mesh is below the Sea of Japan. It is below what we understand as solid ground across a territory larger than many countries. The seismic survey filed the layer as an unexplained geological feature. The Program Monitoring Office filed its 2020 surface data and noted that depth extent was not mapped. No one has put these two datasets together except me in this session by following a cross-reference from a geological registry to a classified program file to an unconnected seismic survey in a university data repository. I am going to close this file. I am going to note the geological registry cross-reference as reviewed. I am going to log my access. There is a question the program file does not answer. How old is the mesh material? not how long it has been propagating from height 611. That timeline is clear, beginning January 29, 1986. How old is the technology? Belov's metallurgical analysis documented a crystalline structure that no known manufacturing process can produce. Turova documented a replacement process that converts silicate rock to a perfect electromagnetic absorber at room temperature and ambient pressure. Neither process exists in any human metallurgical tradition, in any documented historical or contemporary industrial context. The technology did not develop on Earth. The object that carried it was an automatic deployment unit, a seeder, not a vessel. Seeders are sent ahead. Before what? To prepare what? For what purpose a 1,400-kilometer electromagnetic barrier at depth serves, and who or what the barrier serves, is the question the file opens and does not answer. Point source of enhanced reflectivity at point source of enhanced reflectivity at approximately 2,100 meters depth, directly below the height to 611 impact coordinates. Not a layer, a point. 11 meters across. The team characterized it as a mineral inclusion of unusually high density, common enough in the regional geology to not require follow-up. In the context of the program file, at 2,100 meters depth below the original impact point, 38 years after the mesh was deployed, a point of high acoustic reflectivity 11 meters across, in the center of the expanding replacement zone. The mesh converges on something that was already there. The mesh grew toward it from above. Whatever the object seated height 611 to protect or connect with, it is at 2,100 meters depth. The mesh is between us and it, and the mesh absorbs everything we might use to see it. Every drill core, every seismic signal, every electromagnetic probe directed downward through the replacement zone would be absorbed before reaching 2,100 meters. The point source at depth is effectively invisible to us. The mesh made it invisible. That is what the mesh is for, not merely to spread, but to seal. I thought the object that struck height 611 was a vessel, something that had malfunctioned or been shot down or crashed for reasons of its own. I was wrong about what the object was for. It was not a vessel. A vessel carries occupants or cargo to a destination. The object at height 611 carried one thing: the mesh. The impact was not an accident and not a malfunction. It was a deployment. The object arrived at height 611 for the specific purpose of leaving the mesh there, and the mesh has been doing what the mesh does since January 29, 1986, growing, spreading, converting the rock it moves through into more of itself, absorbing electromagnetic radiation as it goes, making the interior of the Earth incrementally opaque to any signal we might try to pass through it. The Zasavatel, the Cedar, an automatic deployment unit. Arrive. Release payload. Payload self-propagates. Turova noted that the replacement material absorbs greater than 99.7% of electromagnetic radiation. I have spent some time considering what a 1,400-kilometer horizontal layer of electromagnetic absorber at 200 to 800 meters depth would mean for any signal directed downward through it, or any signal originating from below it trying to reach the surface. It would mean near total isolation, a zone where what is above cannot communicate through rock with what is below, and what is below cannot communicate through rock with what is above.
The object arrived at height 611 and seeded a barrier. Whether the barrier is designed to keep something from being detected from above, or to keep something from being reached from below, I cannot determine from this file. Both are consistent with the physical properties of the replacement material. Both are consistent with a deployment event rather than a crash event. I am closing the folder.